Welcome to World Talk Brief. There's a pretty big disagreement happening right now in Washington over the Jeffrey Epstein files. On one side, you have the Department of Justice, which says it has released everything required by a new transparency law. The problem? Well, the very lawmakers who wrote that law are saying not so fast. They believe the DOJ is holding back some really crucial information. So today, we're going to walk through the official story, the pushback from Congress, the specific documents at the center of this fight, a very controversial list of names, and the ultimate demand for real transparency. Okay, so let's start with the official story from the Department of Justice. What are they saying? The DOJ sent a formal letter to Congress, and its message was pretty simple. We've done our job. They stated that they have completely fulfilled their legal obligations. As far as they're concerned, this case is closed. Now, the specific language they used here is really key. The letter says they released all records. That kind of phrasing is very deliberate. It's meant to signal complete and total compliance, leaving, no wiggle room. So, the DOJ's letter basically boiled down to three key claims. First, they've handed over everything they have. Second, and this is a big one, they insist nothing was withheld just to protect powerful people or to avoid embarrassment. And third, they provided a list of all the names found in those files. Okay, so that's the DOJ side. But the lawmakers who actually wrote the Transparency Act, well, they see things very, very differently. And this is really where you see the heart of the conflict. The DOJ says we're done, while the authors of the law are saying the release is insufficient. It's a direct standoff between a government agency and the legislators who made the rules. The two people leading this public challenge are Republican Thomas Massie and Democrat Ro Khanna. And what makes their argument so powerful is that they are the bipartisan co-authors of the law. So they're not just outside critics, they're the architects of the very legislation we're talking about. So what are they actually fighting about? Well, it all seems to come down to a very specific set of documents. The central question here is, what's missing? If the DOJ says it released everything, what did these lawmakers say is still being held back? The answer gets right to the heart of how prosecutors make their decisions. According to Representative Massie, the DOJ is using a legal loophole. It's called deliberative process privilege, and he says they're using it to withhold key files. This is the core of the lawmakers' entire argument. So you might be asking, what exactly is that privilege? Well, in simple terms, it's a legal concept that lets government agencies keep their internal discussions and debates private. The whole idea is to allow officials to speak freely and candidly when they're making tough decisions. But here's the kicker. According to Representative Massie, the entire reason they wrote the Epstein Files Transparency Act was to get around this exact privilege. He's arguing that the law was specifically designed to make these internal documents public. And he's not being vague about it either. His position is that the law he co-authored explicitly requires the release of the internal stuff, the memos, the notes, the emails, all related to the very decisions about whether to investigate and prosecute Epstein and his network. Now, beyond the missing memos, there's a second major point of criticism, and this one is about the information the DOJ did release, specifically that long list of names. The list of names the DOJ put out is, well, it's a bit of a head-scratcher. You've got these incredibly powerful figures right alongside deceased musicians like Janis Joplin and Elvis Presley. The DOJ even admits these names pop up in a wide variety of contexts, which could mean anything from direct involvement to just being mentioned in a newspaper article found in the files. Representative Ro Khanna didn't mince words. He called this whole thing absurd. He argues that the DOJ is purposefully muddying the waters. By throwing every name into one giant list without any context, it becomes almost impossible for the public to figure out who might be a person of interest and who's just a random name dropped in the document. So with these two big criticisms, the missing memos and the confusing list of names, what's the end goal for these lawmakers? What are they asking for? Representative Khanna broke it down into three pretty clear demands. 1, release all the files, and that includes those internal memos. 2, stop what they see as a process that ends up protecting predators. And 3, the only information that should be blacked out or redacted is the names of the survivors. Everything else should be public. And, it's really important to understand that this isn't happening in a vacuum. This conflict is just the latest chapter in a long pattern of issues with how these sensitive documents have been handled. For example, lawmakers have complained before about improperly redacted files, which actually led to at least one document being unredacted after public pressure. And then more recently, the DOJ had to apologize for what it called a technical or human error that accidentally released unredacted information about victims. So you can see how this history has created a deep sense of mistrust. All of this really brings us to a huge fundamental question. When a law is passed that demands full transparency, but the government agency in charge and the lawmakers who wrote the law can't even agree on what full means, who gets the final say? It's a conflict that goes way beyond just this one case. It really strikes at the heart of government accountability, the difference between the intent of a law and how it's interpreted, and ultimately, the public's right to know what's going on. Subscribe to World Talk Brief for more clear, thoughtful explanations.